Hold my arm, Mama. We'll cross together.
Thank you, my son.
Watch your step. A bus is coming.
I see it. You are a blessing.
Here, please take this.
Thank you, my son.
Eat. You need strength.
Bless you.
Take care now. You too.
They warned him not to stop. A blind woman with torn clothes and an empty bowl was not his business. She was not his burden. She was not his responsibility. The city had 1,000 like her, standing on corners, sitting on pavements, reaching hands into air that never reached back. But he stopped anyway. He guided her through traffic that did not care if she lived or died. He fed her with money he could not afford to spend. He spoke to her like she mattered in a world that had already decided she did not. What he did not know, what nobody standing on that road that morning could have imagined, was that the poor blind woman he helped was married to the wealthiest man in town. And by the time the truth came to the surface, his small act of kindness would return as a reward so large that it would rearrange the furniture of his entire life. But we are getting ahead of the story, and this story deserves to be told from the beginning, because the beginning is where the character of a man is forged, and without the beginning, the ending means nothing. The sun had not yet climbed high when Kofi stepped out of his one-room apartment and locked the door with a key that had grown thin from too many anxious mornings. The room behind him was small enough that a man could stand in the center and touch both walls with his fingertips. It held a thin mattress on a wooden frame, a plastic chair with one leg shorter than the others, a small table that doubled as a kitchen counter, and a mirror with a crack running diagonally across it, like a scar from a wound the glass never asked for. Kofi looked at himself in that cracked mirror every morning, and every morning the crack divided his face into two halves, one clear, one distorted. He often wondered which half was the real one, the man he was or the man the world saw. His shirt that morning was clean. He had washed it the night before, by hand, wrung it with careful fists, and hung it on a nail beside the window where the night breeze could dry it by dawn. The shirt was white once. Now it was the color of a cloud that had carried too much rain, not quite gray, not quite yellow, just tired, like a soldier that had fought too many battles in the same uniform. He adjusted the strap of his small brown bag, a bag he had bought 3 years ago from a market stall for the equivalent of 2 days' meals. The zipper was broken. He used a safety pin instead. Inside was a single folder containing his certificates, his identification card, and a letter inviting him for an interview at a logistics company across town. He checked his pocket. The money inside was thin, enough for transport there, maybe a bottle of water, maybe a small something to settle his stomach before the interview. Not enough for transport back if things went wrong. He would have to walk home if the world said no again. Kofi stepped onto the narrow path that led from his compound to the main road. The path was unpaved, lined with open gutters that smelled of yesterday's mistakes. Neighbors moved around him, women frying yams over charcoal fires, children in school uniforms shouting at each other over a deflated football, a man pushing a cart loaded with scrap metal, his muscles working like ropes under brown skin. Nobody greeted Kofi, not because they disliked him, but because in a neighborhood where everybody was fighting the same war against poverty, there was no energy left over for pleasantries. Good morning was a luxury, survival was the currency. And Kofi had been surviving for a long time. He was 26 years old. He had the body of a man who had done physical work since childhood, shoulders that carried weight without complaint, hands that knew the texture of concrete and timber and sweat. But his eyes were older than his body. They held something that hard labor cannot put there. They held the memory of loss. Kofi's father died when he was 14, a quiet man who repaired shoes under a corrugated zinc roof at the edge of the motor park. He worked with small nails, a hammer that had been rehandled 4 times, and a patience that Kofi did not fully appreciate until it was gone. His father would sit on a low wooden stool, hunched over a customer's shoe, humming a hymn under his breath, fixing soles that other people walked on without thinking. One Tuesday afternoon, between one shoe and the next, his father's heart decided it had beaten enough. He fell forward off the stool. The hammer slipped from his fingers. The hymn stopped mid-note. By the time someone called for help, his eyes were already looking at a ceiling he could no longer see. Heart attack. That is what the nurse at the clinic said. She said it quickly, the way people say things they have said too many times. She did not look at Kofi's mother when she said it. She looked at the wall. Kofi's mother, Abena, tried to hold things together. She sold provisions from a small wooden kiosk, soap, sugar, matches, tins of milk, sachets of water. She balanced the world on her shoulders the way market women do, not because they are strong, but because nobody offers to help carry. Then the fire came. A kerosene lamp in a neighboring shop fell during the night. The fire spread the way fire spreads in markets built from wood and zinc and hope, quickly, cruelly, without asking permission. By morning, Abena's kiosk was ash. Her stock was smoke. Her savings, which she kept in a metal box under the counter because she did not trust banks, melted into a lump of coins fused together like a fist that would never open. Nobody investigated the fire. Nobody compensated the traders. Nobody rebuilt the market for 3 years, and by then, Abena's family had scattered like seeds thrown into the wind. Kofi's older sister moved north to work in a factory. His younger brother went to live with an uncle in the village. And Kofi stayed in the city because the city, for all its cruelty, at least offered the illusion of opportunity. He became his own father, his own elder, his own comfort. He took every job that came and left without ceremony, loading trucks at the timber yard, carrying bags of cement at construction sites, cleaning offices at night when the real workers had gone home, mopping floors in buildings where men in suits made decisions during the day that would never include him, washing cars at a hotel where guests paid for one night what he earned in a month. People called him hard-working. They said it the way people say things to poor young men, half compliment, half consolation prize. "Ugh, Kofi, you are a hard-working boy. God will bless you." But hard-working was not his gift. Survival was. He survived the way a tree survives in dry soil, not by growing fast, but by sending roots deep enough to find water that nobody else can reach. And now, on this particular morning, survival had a deadline. The interview was at a company called Asante Logistics, a small but growing operation that handled freight and deliveries across the region. They were hiring for an entry-level coordinator position, someone to manage schedules, track shipments, handle paperwork. The salary was modest by anyone's standards, but to Kofi, it was a door. The first real door he had seen in years. Not a window, not a crack in the wall, a door with a handle. And he was determined to reach it before someone else turned the handle first. The invitation letter said 10 a.m. sharp. It said candidates who arrived late would not be considered. It said to bring original certificates and a valid identification card. Kofi had everything in his brown bag. He had ironed his shirt until the collar stood at attention. He had polished his shoes, old shoes but polished with a dedication that would have made his father proud. He began walking towards the main road where the city's noise was already alive, a percussion of engines, horns, voices, and ambition, all beating against the morning air like a drum hit from every direction at once. His heart was keeping its own rhythm, faster than normal, louder than comfortable. and underneath the rhythm, a whisper from somewhere inside himself that he could not ignore. Do not let anything delay you today. Whatever you see, keep walking. Whatever you hear, keep moving. Today is not the day to stop for anyone. The main road was a river of chaos. Trotro buses coughed black smoke and swallowed passengers like mechanical beasts that had learned to eat standing up. Motorcycles wove between vehicles with the confidence of creatures that believed they could not die. Street vendors balanced trays of bread, ground nuts, sachets of water, and phone chargers on their heads, calling out prices like praise singers at a festival where the only celebration was commerce. A woman selling oranges shouted, sweet orange, as if the fruit needed defending. A man pushing a cart of second-hand shoes shouted back, original shoe, London shoe, as if geography guaranteed quality. The air tasted like diesel and dust and fried plantain. The sun pressed down on everything with the patience of a debt collector who knows you cannot hide forever. Kofi navigated through it all with the focused urgency of a man who understood that in this city, time does not wait for poor people. Time waits for the people who own the clocks. Everyone else must run. He was running. And then he saw her. At first, he noticed only the torn clothes. They were the kind of clothes that had been washed too many times, not with soap and care, but with desperation and bare hands against stone. The fabric had surrendered its original color long ago, and now existed in a shade that belonged to nothing. Not blue, not gray, not brown, just the color of cloth that had been forgotten. Then he noticed the bowl in her hands. It was a small metal bowl, dented on one side, empty. Not the kind of empty that suggests someone just ate and the bowl is waiting to be refilled. The kind of empty that has been empty for so long that the bowl has forgotten what food looks like. Then he saw her eyes. They were open, but they did not hold the world. They were the eyes of someone whose sight had left long ago. Not suddenly, not violently, but slowly, like a guest who packs quietly and slips out the back door while the house is sleeping. Her scarf was faded. Her wrapper was frayed at the hem where the fabric had been dragged across too many rough surfaces. Her feet were bare. Not the fashionable barefoot of a child playing, the bare feet of a woman who had no shoes. The soles were cracked and dark. The toenails were untrimmed, the feet of someone who walked through a world that refused to pave a path for her. She was old, not ancient, maybe 55, maybe 60, the kind of age that poverty accelerates, because when life is hard, time moves faster through the body. Wrinkles arrive early. Gray hair comes uninvited. The spine curves sooner than it should, bent by the weight of years that offered nothing light to carry. She stood there, bowl in her hands, eyes that could not find the world, feet that could not find shoes, and around her hundreds of people moved like water around a stone, never stopping, never slowing, never asking why the stone was there. Kofi slowed down. He did not mean to. His feet made the decision before his brain approved it. Something about her, something about the way she stood so still while everything around her rushed, caught him the way a fishhook catches flesh. Quick, sharp, impossible to ignore once it's in. A man beside him clicked his tongue. "Young man, don't stop there. Keep moving." A woman carrying a basin of tomatoes on her head hissed without breaking stride. "If you start helping everyone, you will miss your own destiny. Let her be." An older man, sitting on a bench near the crossing with a newspaper open across his knees, added his voice without looking up. "Blind beggars are everywhere. They will finish your pocket before you finish your journey. Walk." 3 warnings from 3 strangers in 3 seconds, each one spoken with the casual authority of people who have made peace with indifference, each one spoken like wisdom, each one spoken like permission to look away. And each one landed in Kufi's ears and fought against the thing happening in his chest. He tried to keep walking. He tried to remember the interview. He tried to remember the thin money in his pocket and the thinner chances in his future. He tried to obey his own morning warning, do not let anything delay you today. But then the blind woman spoke. Not loudly, not dramatically, not with the practiced performance of someone who has learned to weaponize pity. She did not cry, she did not wail, she did not invoke God or curse the city or beg with the theatrical desperation that some use to extract sympathy from hurried strangers. She just spoke, quietly, simply, like a human being who was tired of being invisible. "Please," she said, "can someone help me cross?" Her voice was small. It barely survived the noise around it. It was the kind of voice that gets swallowed by traffic and forgotten before the next heartbeat. A voice that probably said these same words many times before, at this same crossing, on other mornings, and had been answered by nothing. But something in that simplicity struck Kofi the way a small stone strikes a tin roof, quiet but unforgettable. He stopped. His feet, which had been obeying the clock and the crowd and the interview and the fear, suddenly chose a different master. He stopped. He looked at the road. Cars rushed past like predators who had learned to move on wheels. A trotro bus honked so aggressively that the sound felt physical, like being pushed. Motorcycles sliced through gaps that did not exist, their riders trusting luck more than logic. Then he looked at her hands trembling slightly around the empty bowl, her bare feet on the edge of the pavement, her face turned toward the road she could hear but could not see. And he understood something that the crowd around him had either forgotten or chosen to forget. She was not standing at the edge of a road. She was standing at the edge of danger. And the only thing between her and that danger was the willingness of a single person to stop walking and start caring. Kofi swallowed. He checked his wrist, an old habit. His wrist was bare. He had never owned a watch, but the gesture was a reflex, the body's way of saying, "You know you don't have time for this." He knew. He also knew that the woman was afraid. Not the fear of hunger, not the fear of poverty, the fear of being crushed and forgotten, the fear of stepping into a river of metal and noise and never reaching the other side. He could not walk past that fear. His body would not let him. Something in his bones, something his mother had planted there, or his father, or the ancestors whose names he would never know, something deeper than reason reached up through his chest and held his feet to the ground. Kofi stepped closer. "Mama," he said gently, "hold my arm." The voices came immediately. A young man behind him laughed. "Ah, see this one. Small boy wants to be a hero. You will regret it." A woman adjusting her tray of plantains shook her head. "Leave her. Mind your own business. You cannot save everybody." A keke driver slowing at the crossing leaned out and grinned. "Blind woman, you want to make this young man miss his appointment." Kofi did not respond to any of them. He had learned long ago that the people who shout the loudest from the sideline are the ones who never step onto the field. They watch, they judge, they advise, but they never move. And he was tired of listening to people who never move. He offered his elbow. The blind woman's fingers, thin and careful, found him. Not quickly, not confidently, but the way a person in deep water reaches for something solid, slowly, trembling, hoping it is real. Her grip was light, almost nothing, but the trust in that grip was heavy. Trust in this world is a heavy thing. It costs the person giving it everything, because trust is a door you open without knowing what is on the other side. She trusted him, a stranger, on a road that had ignored her. Kofi waited. The traffic was thick and impatient. He watched the flow. He counted the gaps between vehicles the way a fisherman counts the rhythm of waves before casting his net. A bus horn blared. His heart jumped, but his arm did not flinch. He held steady because the woman was holding his arm, and a flinch from him would become an earthquake for her. The traffic slowed. A brief gap opened. 3 seconds, maybe. 4. "Now, Mama," he said. "Walk with me. I have you." They stepped off the pavement together, one careful pace, then another. The blind woman's bare feet moved across the hot asphalt with the caution of someone who has learned that the ground is not always kind. Kofi matched her pace. He did not rush her. He did not pull. He walked beside her the way you walk beside someone who matters. A motorcycle swerved around them. The rider cursed. Kofi ignored him. A car honked. Kofi raised his free hand. A calm signal, not aggressive, just visible. The car slowed. Step by step, pace by pace, the crossing that takes a sighted person 8 seconds took them nearly a full minute. 60 seconds of vulnerability in a city that eats the vulnerable for breakfast. When they reached the other side, the blind woman exhaled. It was not a normal exhale. It was the breath of someone who had been holding their lungs closed for a very long time, like a person who has been underwater and finally breaks the surface, deep, shaking, full of relief that is indistinguishable from grief. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was quiet. "Thank you, my son." Kofi nodded. "You are welcome, Mama." He tried to step away, to reclaim his time, to resume the race toward his interview. His brain was already calculating how many minutes lost, how much distance left, how fast he needed to walk to arrive before the door closed. But then he noticed something that his brain had been too busy to register. Her bowl was empty. Not low, not almost empty, empty. The kind of empty that echoes when you tap it. The kind of empty that makes no pretense about what it means. And then a sound rose from her body, small, honest, the sound of a stomach that has stopped asking politely and started simply stating facts. She was hungry. Not the mild hunger of a person who skipped breakfast by choice, the hunger of a person who cannot remember the last time food was a question mark. Kofi hesitated. And in that hesitation, a war took place inside him. On one side, the interview, the job, the door, the future, the money in his pocket that was already too thin for the day's demands. If he spent anything here, he might not have enough for transport. He might have to walk. He might arrive sweating, late, gasping, and the panel would look at him the way panels always look at men who arrive sweating, late, and gasping. Like he was not serious, like poverty was a character flaw. On the other side, a woman, hungry, blind, alone, holding an empty bowl in a city that had decided she was furniture. Kofi calculated, the way poor people calculate, carefully, painfully, with the error of error only people who cannot afford errors understand. Every coin has weight when you have nothing. Every decision has consequences when there is no safety net below you. He had enough for the bus fare and a small snack. If he bought the woman food, he would have to walk at least part of the way. He would arrive later than planned. His shirt would cling to his back with sweat. His shoes would collect dust. He would look exactly like what the world already believed he was, a man without resources. But as he stood there doing the math, he looked at her face, and he saw something that did not belong to her clothes. Dignity. Even in torn wrapper, she held herself like a woman who had not forgotten her own name. Even with an empty bowl, she stood as if standing itself was an act of resistance. Her spine was not straight, poverty and age had curved it, but there was something in the way she held her head. Not tilted down in shame, not thrown back in defiance, just level, balanced, as if she had decided long ago that her circumstances did not get to determine her posture. Kofi's throat tightened. "Mama," he said softly, "have you eaten today?" The blind woman paused. A pause that was louder than any words, a pause that contained the entire answer before her mouth opened. "No," she said quietly, "I have not." Kofi turned toward a nearby food cellar. A woman standing behind a large blackened pot frying balls of bean cake, kose, in shimmering oil. Beside her, a second pot held soft porridge made from millet, warm and thick. The smell floated through the morning air like a hand reaching out and tapping every passing nose. Rich, golden, the smell of something that could turn a bad morning into a bearable one. Kofi reached into his pocket. His fingers found the thin stack of notes. He peeled off enough for a portion of kose and porridge. The food seller looked at him, then looked at the blind woman, then looked back at him. Her eyebrows rose. "Young man," she said, "you are buying for her?" "Yes, Mama." The food seller studied him for a moment. She could see his clothes. She could count the bones in his economy. She knew he was not a man with money to spare. "You have a good heart," she said, wrapping the food in a brown paper. "May your pocket never run dry." Kofi carried the food to the blind woman. He guided her to a low concrete bench beside the stall, the kind of bench that exists in every African city, unplanned, unowned, just there, like a chair the earth grew for tired people. He helped her sit. He placed the warm food in her hands. She hesitated. Her fingers explored the shape of the package the way blind people explore everything, with the patience of someone who must build the world through touch alone. Then she felt the warmth, and her hands began to tremble. Not from cold, not from weakness, from the shock of unexpected tenderness. From the simple, overwhelming reality that a stranger, in a city that had walked past her all morning, had stopped and purchased food and placed it in her hands as if she mattered. "God bless you," she whispered. Her voice cracked on the word bless, as if even the blessing cost her something to give. Kofi wanted to stay. Something in him wanted to sit beside her and make sure she ate safely, but the clock in his chest was pounding now, louder than before, louder than kindness, louder than everything. "I have to go, Mama," he said. "Please eat. Take care of yourself." He stood up and turned to leave. But then, as he turned, her hand reached out and caught his wrist. Not grabbing, just touching, the way a leaf touches water, light enough to rest, heavy enough to stop the current. "My son," she said, "what is your name?" "Kofi," he answered. "And where are you going with such hurried feet?" Kofi sighed. Not with impatience, with the peculiar exhaustion of a man who has been chasing his future for so long that running has become his resting state. "To an interview, Mama. If I miss it, I may not get another chance for a long time." The blind woman nodded slowly. Not the quick nod of dismissal, the slow nod of someone who understands urgency because they have lived inside it. "Then go," she said. "And may the road carry you gently. May the door open before you knock, and may the people on the other side see what I have seen." Kofi did not fully understand those words, but they settled into his chest like warm tea in an empty stomach, filling a space he did not know was hollow. He pulled his wrist free gently. He nodded once, and he ran. He ran to the bus stop. He waited in a line that moved like cold honey. He boarded a trotro that was already full, his body pressed between a woman holding a sleeping baby and a man whose elbows seemed to have their own agenda. The bus lurched forward. Kofi stood, gripping the overhead rail, his shirt beginning to stick to his back as the heat inside the bus climbed toward unbearable. He watched the streets slide past through the window. His mind returned to the blind woman, her empty bowl, her trembling fingers on the warm food, the way she said, "God bless you," as if the words were the most expensive thing she owned. He shook his head. Focus, interview, future, door, handle, turn the handle. The bus stopped near the company. Kofi jumped down before it fully stopped, stumbled, caught himself, and ran again. His shoes slapped the pavement, sweat rolled down his temples. He reached the gate breathless. A security guard looked at him the way security guards look at people who arrive out of breath, with suspicion and mild contempt, as if urgency in a poor man is automatically guilty. "Where are you going?" the guard asked. "I'm here for the interview," Kofi gasped. "Asante Logistics, coordinator position." The guard checked a clipboard, found his name, looked at him again, slowly, as if double-checking that the name and the man could possibly be related. "Go in," the guard said. "Building on the left, second floor." Kofi adjusted his shirt, wiped his face with a handkerchief that had seen better decades, tried to flatten his breathing into something that didn't sound like he had just escaped a fire. He entered the waiting room. 8 other candidates sat there, clean suits, polished shoes, printed resumes in clear folders. They looked like people who had arrived by car, people who had eaten breakfast, people whose shirts had never been washed by hand and dried on a nail. Kofi sat in the last empty chair. He placed his brown bag on his lap and held it with both hands, as if letting go of it would mean letting go of his chance. He waited. His name was called. He entered the interview room. 3 people sat behind a long table, 2 men in suits, 1 woman in a blazer with reading glasses perched on her nose like a bird deciding whether to fly. They asked questions. Kofi answered. They asked about experience. He told them about loading trucks, managing deliveries for a small trader, organizing stock for a warehouse that closed after 6 months. They asked about education. He presented his certificates. They looked at them the way people look at documents from institutions they have never heard of. They asked about his strengths. He said, "I am reliable. I show up. I do not make excuses, and I learn quickly because I cannot afford to learn slowly." One of the men wrote something. The woman adjusted her glasses. The other man glanced at Kofi's shoes. They thanked him. They told him they would be in touch. They did not smile. Kofi stood, shook their hands, and walked out. Outside, the sun was higher now, hotter. The interview was over, and his pocket was lighter, and the walk home would be long because the food he bought for the blind woman was the food that would have paid for his return bus fare. He walked, and as he walked, a thought settled on him like dust. They did not choose me. I could see it in their eyes. They measured me by my shirt and my shoes and my school, and they found me lacking. He walked for an hour. His feet ached. His spirit ached more. But somewhere between the aching and the walking, a different thought arrived, quieter, stranger. At least the woman ate today. He held on to that thought the way a drowning man holds on to wood. It was not much, but it floated. Days passed, each one identical to the one before it, the way days pass for people who are waiting for news that may never come. Kofi checked his phone every hour. The screen remained silent. No calls, no messages, no doors opening. He returned to his routine, carrying loads, washing cars, cleaning offices, the work that keeps a man alive without letting him live. 1 week, nothing. 10 days, nothing. 2 weeks, the silence was its own answer. But Kofi refused to hear it because hearing it would mean accepting that once again the world had looked at him and decided he was not enough. And then the second encounter happened. Kofi was walking through the market on an errand, carrying a box of supplies for a shop owner who paid him by the day. The market was loud, dense, and alive with the organized chaos that only African markets understand, where a woman selling peppers can have a full argument with a woman selling fish 3 stalls away without either of them moving from their spot. He heard the commotion before he saw it. Voices raised, a crowd forming, the particular energy that humans generate when they sense conflict and gather around it like moths around a flame, not to help, but to watch. Kofi moved closer. At the center of the crowd, on the ground, was the blind woman. She had fallen or been pushed. Her bowl had spilled. The small amount of food someone had apparently given her earlier lay in the dust, ruined, and standing over her, a market woman in a bright head tie, hands on her hips, voice like a machete cutting through air. "You blind people are wicked," the woman shouted. "You bumped into my tray deliberately. You want to spoil my goods and disgrace me in this market." The blind woman's hands searched the ground, trying to find her bowl, trying to gather what was left of her dignity. Her voice was small against the shouting. "I am sorry. I did not mean—" "Shut up," the woman screamed. "You will pay me for the damage. Every kobo." The crowd watched. Some shook their heads. Some murmured, but nobody moved. Nobody stepped forward. Nobody said what everybody could see, that an old blind woman on the ground did not bumper anyone's tray deliberately, that she could not see the tray, that she could not see any of us. A man nearby added his fuel. "These beggars are becoming too bold, roaming around the market, touching everything." Another voice. "Drive her out. She is bad luck." Kofi felt the heat rise in his chest, the same heat that had stopped him at the crossing, the same fire that had overridden his schedule and his budget and his fear. He pushed through the crowd. "Stop," he said. Not shouting, not aggressive, just firm. The firmness of a man who has decided that silence in the presence of cruelty is a form of cruelty itself. The market woman turned. "And who are you?" she snapped. "Her lawyer?" Kofi stepped forward. He bent down and helped the blind woman sit up. He picked up her bowl. He dusted the dirt from her wrapper with gentle hands, the way you dust a grandmother's cloth, the way you handle something sacred that the world has treated as common. Then he stood and faced the market woman. "I saw what happened," he said. "She didn't bump your tray. Someone in the crowd pushed past her. She lost her balance. She is blind. She cannot see your tray. She cannot see you. She cannot see any of us." The crowd shifted. Some looked away, because many of them had seen the same thing Kofi saw. But seeing truth and speaking truth are 2 different forms of courage, and the second one is much more expensive. The market woman scoffed. But her fire was weakening. She could feel the crowd turning toward embarrassment, and in the market, embarrassment is a currency nobody wants to hold. "How much was the damage?" Kofi asked. The woman named a price. Kofi reached into his pocket, the same pocket that was already thin, the same pocket that had not recovered from the last time he spent money he did not have on a woman he did not know. He paid. The market woman took the money, muttered something about useless blind people under her breath, and walked away, dragging her shame behind her like a wrapper that had come loose. Kofi helped the blind woman stand. He guided her away from the crowd, away from the stares, away from the cruelty that comes so easily when people believe no one important is watching. He found a shaded spot, a quiet wall where the noise of the market was muffled. He helped her sit. He bought water and placed it in her hands. She drank slowly, the way a person drinks who is not just thirsty for water, but thirsty for peace. Each sip was a small act of recovery. Each swallow pushed the world's noise a little further away. Then she turned her face toward him. Her clouded eyes pointed past his shoulder, but her attention was precisely on him. "My son," she said gently, "you have helped me twice now." Kofi swallowed. "It is nothing, Mama." The blind woman's expression shifted, not dramatically, just a slight tightening of her lips, the face of someone who has heard a lie and chooses to correct it softly. "It is something," she said. "In this world, small kindness is not small. It is rare, and rare things are never nothing." Kofi looked at the ground. He did not know what to say. He only knew that each time he helped this woman, something inside him felt clean, like a room that has been swept, like a mirror that has been wiped. Even though his pocket was emptier, something else was fuller. He wanted to ask her things: where she lived, who took care of her, whether she had family, whether there was someone in this city who knew her name and said it with love. But in this city, questions open doors that you may not be able to close, and Kofi had learned that carrying your own weight is hard enough without volunteering to carry mysteries. "I have to go, Mama," he said. She nodded, and before he left, she lifted her hand. Not to touch his face, her fingers found only air, but the gesture was enough. It was a blessing delivered through empty space, a hand that wanted to hold the face of a stranger who had been kinder to her than most people she had known. "May your name be mentioned for good," she said, "even in rooms you have never entered." Kofi left. He carried those words with him like a stone in his shoe, not painful, but present, impossible to ignore. Mentioned for good in rooms he had never entered. What rooms? Whose rooms? He shook it off. He had deliveries to make, bills to survive, a phone that still held no messages about any interview. 3 more days passed, then 4, then 5. Kofi stopped checking his phone. He accepted what the silence meant. The door he had walked toward had closed, not with a slam, with the quiet click of a lock turning, the kind of rejection that doesn't even bother to make noise. He was back where he started: small jobs, small money, small room, cracked mirror dividing his face into the man he was and the man the world saw. Then one evening his friend Kwesi called. "Kofi." Kwesi's voice was strange, tight, excited, afraid, like a man who had seen something he did not understand. "What is it?" "Are you home?" "Yes." "Why?" "Wear your best clothes. Someone is looking for you." Kofi frowned. "Who?" "I don't know." Kwesi paused. "But a big car came to the neighborhood. Big car, the kind that does not come here. They asked for you by name. They said they will return in 1 hour. Kofi's blood went cold. A big car in his neighborhood asking for him by name. His first thought was fear. Had he offended someone powerful? Had he mistakenly disrespected someone's wife? Had the market woman reported him? In a city where power moves without explanation, a big car can mean blessing or burial, and poor men rarely get to choose which one. He looked around his room: plastic chair, thin mattress, cracked mirror. The appointment letter, the one from the interview that never called back, sat on his table, still in its folder, still hopeful, still waiting for a future that hadn't arrived. Kofi found his best shirt, the one he saved for Sundays. He found his best trousers. He found the shoes he had polished for the interview. He dressed in silence. He stood before the cracked mirror. Both halves of his face stared back, one clear, one distorted. "Which one are you tonight?" he whispered to his reflection. The reflection did not answer. Outside, neighbors gathered. They emerged from doorways and leaned over compound walls and stood in clusters, whispering the way people whisper when something unusual enters a familiar place. Who is looking for Kofi? What did he do? Maybe trouble. Or maybe God has remembered him. Kofi climbed into the car like a man stepping into a river whose depth he could not measure. The car moved through the city and entered a part of town that Kofi had only seen from bus windows. Streets so smooth they were silent, trees so green they looked painted, houses so large they had names instead of numbers. The Sterling estate announced itself through gates that were taller than anything in Kofi's neighborhood, iron, ornate, guarded by men who looked like they had been trained to stop things that ordinary people could not stop. The gates opened. The car rolled into a compound that looked like a small country, gardens arranged with the precision of someone who believed flowers should stand at attention, fountains that sang softly to themselves, pathways made of stone that Kofi could never have afforded to step on. He was led inside, through doors wider than his entire room, into a sitting room where the ceiling was so high it seemed to be competing with the sky. Everything was clean. Not the kind of clean that comes from soap, the kind of clean that comes from money, the kind of clean where even the silence is expensive. Kofi sat on the edge of a chair that was probably worth more than a year of his labor. He sat on the edge because sitting fully would feel like a lie, as if he belonged here, in this room, on this furniture, in this world. He waited. A door opened, and a man entered. Tall, older, perhaps 60. His face carried the particular authority of a man who had spent decades being the most important person in every room he entered. But his authority was not loud. It was quiet, the way a mountain is quiet. You do not need to hear a mountain to know it is there. He wore traditional cloth, expensive but not shouting about its expense. His hands were large, his eyes were sharp. His presence filled the room the way a low note fills a cathedral, completely, from floor to ceiling, from corner to corner. Chief Kwame Sterling. Kofi's legs nearly forgot their function. He stood quickly, clumsily. "Good evening, sir," he said. His voice came out smaller than he wanted. The chief studied him, not quickly, not casually, the way a man studies something he is trying to understand at the deepest level. "You are Kofi," he said. "Yes, sir." Silence. The kind of silence that has weight and temperature, the kind you can feel on your skin. Then the chief said 5 words that rearranged everything Kofi thought he understood about the past 3 weeks. "They say you helped my wife." Kofi's brain stopped working. Your wife, sir?" The chief's eyes held steady. "My wife," he repeated. "A blind woman." The room tilted. The floor felt uneven. Kofi's mind raced backward through time. Torn clothes, empty bowl, trembling hands, a quiet voice asking to cross the road, the smell of kose, the market crowd, the shouting woman, the dust on a wrapper he had carefully brushed clean. That woman. The blind woman at the crossing, the woman nobody would help, the woman with bare feet and clouded eyes and a dignity that didn't match her clothing. The wife of the wealthiest man in the region. "Sir," Kofi stammered, I did not know." The chief lifted a hand. The gesture was small, but it stopped Kofi's words the way a dam stops water. "I know you did not know, Kofi," the chief said calmly. "That is precisely why I am speaking to you." He gestured toward a chair. "Sit." Kofi sat, not on the edge this time. His body was too shocked to remember protocol. The chief turned toward a door on the far side of the room and nodded. The door opened. A woman entered, guided gently by a younger attendant. She was dressed differently now. Her wrapper was not torn. It was fine cloth, rich indigo with gold threading that caught the light like tiny stars. Her headscarf was not faded. It was fresh, carefully tied, framing a face that Kofi recognized immediately despite the transformation. Her eyes were the same, clouded, pointing past the world, but her face held that same quality he had noticed on the road, the quality that seemed so misplaced among her torn clothes. Dignity. Now, surrounded by wealth that matched it, the dignity did not look misplaced at all. It looked like it had been there all along, waiting for the world to catch up. Mrs. Amma Sterling. Kofi's chest tightened so hard he thought his ribs might crack. He whispered, "Mama." She smiled, the same small private smile she had offered him at the crossing, but now it carried something additional: recognition, warmth. The smile of a woman who had searched for something in the world and found it in the last place anyone would look, in the hands of a young man with a broken zipper on his bag and transport money in his pocket that he chose to spend on a stranger's breakfast. "Kofi," she said softly. The chief sat down. His large hands rested on his knees. His eyes moved between Kofi and his wife like a man watching two pieces of a story fit together. "My wife's name is Amma Sterling," the chief began. "Before she lost her sight 4 years ago, she was the most active woman in this community. She visited schools, she funded clinics, she sat with mothers in village hospitals and held their hands while they delivered babies they could not afford to raise." He paused. When the blindness came, slowly, then completely, something in her changed. Not her spirit, her trust. She began to wonder whether the people around her treated her well because of who she was, or because of who I am. She began to wonder whether the kindness she received was real, or whether it was a performance staged for the audience of my name. The chief's voice was steady, but beneath it, I heard something raw, something that even wealth cannot smooth over. The pain of watching someone you love doubt the world. "So, she asked me something," the chief continued. "She asked for permission to go out alone, without guards, without escorts, without the name Sterling attached to her clothing. She wanted to dress as a common woman, a forgotten woman, a woman with nothing, and she wanted to see how the world would treat her." Kofi's eyes widened. Mrs. Sterling spoke next. Her voice was quiet but carried the precision of someone who had thought about these words for a long time. "I wanted truth," she said. "Not the truth people show wealthy people. That truth is always polished and performed. I wanted the truth people show to those they believe have nothing to offer them." She turned her face toward Kofi's direction. "I stood on that road for 45 minutes before you stopped. I counted the footsteps that passed me. I listened to the voices that talked about me as if I were furniture. I heard them say I was a burden, a nuisance, an obstacle." Her voice remained calm, but the calm was the kind that exists on the surface of deep water, steady above, turbulent below. "Then I heard your voice," she said. "You said, 'Mama, hold my arm.' Not 'get out of the way,' not 'someone deal with her.' You said, 'hold my arm,' as if my touch was welcome, as if my weight was something you were willing to carry." Kofi's eyes were stinging. He blinked hard. He would not cry in the sitting room of the richest man in town. He would not. "You bought me food," she continued, "with money I could hear you did not have. I cannot see, Kofi, but blindness sharpens every other sense. I heard the way your coins sounded, few and careful. I heard the way the food seller spoke to you, with the gentle admiration people reserve for generosity they know costs the giver everything." She paused. "And in the market, when that woman screamed at me, and the crowd watched, and nobody moved, you came. You stood between me and the cruelty. You paid for damage I did not cause. You cleaned the dust from my wrapper as if my dignity was worth protecting." Kofi could not speak. His throat was closed. His eyes were burning. The tears he was fighting were winning. The chief watched this exchange like a man watching something holy, silently, with reverence, knowing that to interrupt would be to break something sacred. Then the chief spoke. "My wife came home both times," he said. "Both times she told me about a young man named Kofi. She told me what you did. She told me what you said. She told me what you sacrificed." He leaned forward. "She also told me what others did, what they said, how the city treated a blind woman they believed had no name and no protector." His jaw tightened. "I have been the wealthiest man in this town for 20 years, and in all that time I believed the respect people showed me was genuine. My wife's experience has opened my eyes to a truth that my money kept hidden from me. The respect was for the money, not for the man." He looked at Kofi. "But you did not know she was who. You did not know my name was behind her. You helped a woman you believed was nobody, and that is the only kind of kindness that means anything." The chief stood. He walked to a side table. He picked up a folder, slim, official, bearing a company letterhead that Kofi recognized immediately. Asante Logistics. The chief placed the folder on the table and slid it toward Kofi. "Do you recognize this company?" Kofi nodded slowly. His voice was barely a whisper. "I interviewed there 3 weeks ago." "I know," the chief said. "Asante Logistics is my company." Kofi's world shifted on its axis. The floor, the ceiling, the walls, everything rearranged itself in an instant. The company he had interviewed at, the opportunity he had pinned his hopes on, belonged to the husband of the blind woman he had helped on the road. "You were not selected," the chief said bluntly. Kofi's chest collapsed. Even though he had already guessed this, hearing it spoken aloud in this room, by this man, turned the guess into a wound. "Not because you were unqualified," he added. Kofi looked up. "The panel reviewed your application. They told me, and I am quoting their exact words, that you lacked professional presentation. They said your appearance was below the company's brand standard. They said you seemed unsophisticated." Each word landed like a stone dropped on glass. Kofi felt the shame rise in his chest, the familiar burning, choking shame of being judged not by what you carry in your heart, but by what you wear on your body. Then Mrs. Sterling spoke. Her voice was soft, but it cut through the room like a blade through silk. "And yet," she said, "when I stood on the road with torn clothes and bare feet, looking more unsophisticated than anyone in this city, this same young man treated me like I deserved to live." The chief's eyes hardened, not at Kofi, at the world that had failed both of them. "I called that interview panel," the chief said. "I asked them one question." Kofi waited. "I asked them, what is the brand image of a company that can hire a polished man with an empty heart and reject a humble man with a full one?" Silence. "They did not have an answer," the chief said, "because there is no good answer." He tapped the folder. "Open it." Kofi's fingers shook as he opened the folder. Inside was a single document, an appointment letter. His name was printed at the top in clean, official typography. Position, Operations Coordinator. Direct report to Operations Manager. Start date, next Monday. Salary, a number that Kofi read 3 times because his brain refused to believe it the first 2 times. Benefits, health coverage, transport allowance, housing support. Kofi stared at the letter the way a man stares at rain after a long drought, not sure if it's real, not sure if it will last, but feeling it on his skin and knowing that the ground beneath him is about to change. His vision blurred. The tears he had been fighting the entire evening broke through. They fell onto the edge of the paper, creating 2 small wet circles on the document that was about to rearrange his life. "Sir," he whispered, I cannot. Thank you." The chief held up his hand. "Do not thank me," he said. Thank the character your mother gave you. Thank whatever taught you that a blind woman on a road is not an inconvenience, but a human being. I did not create your heart, Kofi. I am only rewarding it." Mrs. Sterling smiled, the fullest smile Kofi had seen from her. "My son," she said, "this is not charity. Charity is what people give when they feel guilty. This is justice. Justice for the kindness you showed when nobody important was watching." She paused. But someone was watching. Someone was always watching. But the chief was not finished. He leaned forward. His expression shifted, now colder, the expression of a man who has seen hypocrisy and will not tolerate it any longer. "There is one more thing," he said. Kofi waited. "Tomorrow," the chief said, "my wife will attend a community gathering, a public event. Leaders, business owners, religious heads, market associations, the people who run this town." He looked at Kofi. "You will accompany her." Kofi's stomach tightened. "Sir?" Mrs. Sterling's voice came gently. "I want the people of this town to see what I saw, Kofi. I want them to understand that the young man they would have walked past is the young man who walked with me." The chief stood again. He straightened his cloth. "My wife will not attend as a blind beggar," he said. "She will attend as Mrs. Kwame Sterling, wife of the wealthiest man in this region." Kofi understood immediately. The same people who ignored her, the same people who shouted at her, the same people who stepped over her like she was a crack in the pavement, they were about to see her walk into a room on the arm of the most powerful man in town. And truth, when it arrives late, does not knock softly. It kicks the door open. The gathering was held in the largest community hall in the district. It was full. Men in Agbada, women in Kente, local government officials in their formal best, business owners wearing their wealth like armor, market association leaders, religious figures, school headmasters, the people who compose the public face of a community, the face it shows when cameras are watching and reputations are being maintained. Kofi stood near the entrance, dressed in clothes the Sterling household had provided. Simple but sharp, clean shirt, pressed trousers, polished shoes, nothing flashy, nothing expensive. Just a young man who looked like he belonged, which for the first time in his life felt like a radical act. Mrs. Sterling entered beside him, guided by his arm, the same arm she had gripped on the road that morning when nobody else would stop. She wore beautiful traditional cloth. Her headscarf was elegant. Her presence was calm and immovable, like a river that does not rush because it knows where it is going. Whispers erupted. Wait, that's Mama Sterling. What is she doing here? And who is that young man with her? Then Chief Sterling entered behind them, and the hall responded the way halls always respond to power, immediately, completely, and with a respect so thick you could spread it on bread. People stood, people bowed, people smiled with every tooth they owned, as if joy had suddenly become an emergency. Kofi watched their faces transform, the same faces that existed on the streets where a blind woman was furniture now were performing adoration at a velocity that made him dizzy. Mrs. Sterling was guided to the front. A microphone was placed before her. She stood quietly for a long moment. The hall hushed. Then she spoke. "My people," she began. Her voice carried across the room with the steadiness of a drum that knows its own rhythm. "For months, I have wondered a question that no amount of money could answer." The hall was silent. "The question was this: if I had nothing, No name, no wealth, no husband, no house. Would anyone in this town still see me as human? A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some shifted in their seats. So I decided to find out. I went out dressed as a woman with nothing, torn clothes, empty bowl, bare feet. I stood on the roadside and asked for help. The murmur became a current. People glanced at each other. Some recognized, with a chill climbing their spines, what she was describing. "Many of you passed me," she said. Her voice did not accuse, it simply stated, the way a mirror states. "Many of you looked at me and looked away. Some of you told me to move. Some of you called me a nuisance. Some of you laughed." A woman in the third row lowered her head. A man near the window suddenly found his shoes very interesting. "But one person stopped," she said. She lifted her hand toward Kofi. "This young man, his name is Kofi Mensah. He helped me cross a road that every one of you walks across daily without danger. He bought me food with money he could not afford to spend. And when a woman in the market screamed at me and accused me of damage I did not cause, he stood up. He paid for the damage, he cleaned the dust from my clothes, and he treated me like a mother." She paused. "He did not know who I was. He did not know my husband's name. He did not know that behind my torn wrapper was a woman who lives in a house larger than most of your businesses." Another pause, longer this time, heavy with intention. "He just knew I was human, and for him that was enough." The hall was silent, the kind of silence that presses against your chest, the kind that makes guilty people feel their guilt in their bodies. Chief Sterling stepped forward. His voice was firm, the voice of a man accustomed to being the final word in any conversation. "From today," he announced, "the Sterling Foundation will establish a permanent initiative to support the blind, the disabled, and the forgotten people of this community, not with pity, with dignity, with infrastructure, with the same respect you give to my name, because their lives are worth no less." Applause, some genuine, some desperate to appear genuine, some mechanical, from hands that moved because they feared what would happen if they did not. The chief was not finished. "And I will say this once," he added, his eyes sweeping the room like searchlights. "Anyone in this community, anyone who mistreats a vulnerable person, who abuses the blind, who mocks the poor, who treats the forgotten as if they do not exist, will answer to me, personally." That sentence landed like thunder at the end of a long, hot day. The room felt it in their teeth. People nodded quickly. People swallowed. People suddenly, desperately remembered their manners. After the event, people approached Kofi, one by one, then in clusters. They greeted him with warmth they had never offered before. They shook his hand with enthusiasm that was manufactured on the spot. They offered business cards, they offered phone numbers, they offered friendship that smelled brand new and still had the price tag attached. "Kofi, my brother, I always knew you were destined for great things. Kofi, you must come for dinner. My wife cooks excellent jollof. Kofi, we are practically family. My late uncle knew your mother." Kofi smiled politely at each one, but he saw through it. Every handshake, every grin, every sudden act of kinship. He remembered the road. He remembered who walked past. He remembered who told him not to stop. He remembered the laughter of the keke driver. He remembered the silence of the crowd in the market. The same people who would not stop for a blind woman were now lining up to stand next to the man who did. Respect, when it arrives only in the presence of power, is not respect. It is fear wearing a smile. As the crowd thinned and the hall began to empty, Mrs. Sterling found Kofi near the exit. She reached for his arm, the arm she already knew by touch. "My son," she said, "you did not help me because of my name." "No, Mama." She nodded. "Then do not allow my name to change you." Kofi looked at her. His eyes were wet again, but this time he did not fight it. "What do you mean, Mama?" "I mean," she said gently, "that many men are kind when they have nothing, and cruel when they have everything. The world is full of people who were humble before God blessed them, and proud after. Do not become one of them." She squeezed his arm. "Let your heart remain the road you walk on. Do not build a new one just because you can afford to." Kofi's chest was tight with something he could not name, not sadness, not joy, something between the two, something holy. "Mama," he asked softly, "why did you do this? Why did you go out like that? What were you really looking for?" Mrs. Sterling's lips pressed together. The question was not unexpected, but the answer cost her something to speak aloud. "Because," she said gently, "that I wanted this town to remind them that the poor are not less human." She paused. "And because I wanted to remind my husband that wealth is not proof of wisdom." From across the room, Chief Sterling heard this. He smiled, not the broad smile of a public figure, the small, private smile of a man who had been corrected by the truth and was grateful for the correction. That night, Kofi returned to his room. Same walls, same mattress, same cracked mirror, same plastic chair with one short leg. But the room felt different, not because anything inside it had changed, because the man standing in it had changed. Not in the way the world would notice. He was still thin, still quiet, still wearing a shirt washed by hand and dried on a nail. But inside, where the real architecture lives, something had shifted. He sat on the edge of his mattress. He held the appointment letter in both hands. He read it again, his name, the position, the salary, the starting date. Then he set the letter down and looked at the cracked mirror. Both halves of his face stared back at him, one clear, one distorted. But tonight, for the first time, Kofi did not wonder which half was the real one, because tonight he understood something that the mirror had been trying to tell him every morning. Both halves were him, the struggle and the strength, the poverty and the purpose, the clear and the cracked. They were not two different men. They were the same man seen from two different angles, and the world, the real world, not the one that measures men by their shirts, the real world had finally seen him from the right angle.
He closed his eyes. He whispered a prayer, not a long prayer, not the kind you perform for an audience, the kind you speak quietly, the way you speak to someone standing very close. He did not pray for money. He did not pray for fame. He did not pray for a bigger room or a nicer shirt or shoes without dust. He prayed for a heart that would not rot when the blessings began to grow. Because in this world, success can change a man faster than failure ever could. Poverty bends the back, but it does not always break the spirit. Wealth, on the other hand, can break the spirit without bending anything. It enters softly, it rearranges quietly, and before you know it, the man who once stopped for a blind woman on the road is the man who drives past her in a car with tinted windows. Kofi prayed against that future. He prayed to remain the man who stops, the man who gives his arm, the man who buys food with money he cannot spare, the man who cleans dust from a stranger's dignity. Not because it is profitable, not because someone important might be watching, but because it is right. And because right is the only foundation that never cracks. There is an old saying, the elders speak it when they want to remind us of something the modern world is trying very hard to make us forget. They say, the hand that lifts the forgotten may be lifting its own destiny. They say the eyes that see the poor as human will never walk blind into regret. And they say one more thing, something quiet, something that sounds simple until you sit with it long enough to feel its weight. They say kindness does not count the cost. Kindness counts the person. Kofi did not count the cost the day he stopped for a blind woman on the road. He counted the person. He counted her trembling hands. He counted her empty bowl. He counted her bare feet. He counted her fear. And because he counted those things, the universe counted him. Not every story ends this way. Not every act of kindness returns as a reward. The world is not a vending machine where you insert goodness and receive blessing. Many kind people live and die without applause. Many generous hearts go unrecognized by anyone but the heavens. But that does not make the kindness less valuable. It makes it more valuable because kindness without expectation of return is the purest form of strength a human being can demonstrate. Kofi did not stop for that woman because he expected something back. He stopped because his feet refused to carry him past her. He stopped because something in his bones, something older than logic, deeper than calculation, told him that a man who can walk past suffering without flinching has already lost something more important than a job interview. He stopped because he was human. And in a city that was slowly forgetting what that word meant, being human was the most radical act of all. His interview was not in the office building with the shiny shoes and the measuring eyes. His interview was on the roadside, between the traffic and the fear, between a bus horn and a blind woman's hand. And he passed. Not because he was smart, not because he was polished, not because he had connections or credentials or confidence. He passed because he chose to be human when nobody was watching. And somebody was always watching. If this story touched you, if it reminded you of something you almost forgot about the world, then share it. Not for me, for the next person who is standing at a crossroads wondering whether kindness is worth the cost. Tell them it is. Tell them it always is. And subscribe to Richie Folktales, because in a world that is getting louder and colder and faster, these stories are becoming more necessary, not less. The next one will make you cry before you reach the middle, and by the end, you will understand why. I will see you in that one.